My name is Sarah, and I need to tell you something right now before this story goes anywhere. The night my husband tried to sell my daughter, he was drunk. He sat across from me at the kitchen table, smiling like a man who had just solved a problem, and told me he had arranged to hand over our 14-year-old girl to a 52-year-old man for $50. I did not scream. I went completely still, because I had heard words like those before. Not about my daughter. About me. Different kitchen. Different man. Same cold transaction. My father sold me for $10 when I was 19 years old, and sitting in that kitchen, looking at my drunk husband, I understood something that stopped my blood cold. The same thing that destroyed my life was about to destroy my daughter's. Unless I moved, right now, tonight. My husband passed out on the floor before he finished his whiskey. And what I did in the 4 hours after that, I am going to tell you everything. But I also need to tell you about the man I met after I ran. A quiet man. A lonely man. A man sitting alone in a big house on a hill who, when I showed up at his door with 4 daughters and $3 and nothing else, looked at my face in a way that no man had ever looked at me in my entire life. Not like something to be used, like someone worth knowing. I did not understand yet what that man and I were going to do together. I did not know yet that my pages and his grief were going to combine into something that would shake 3 counties. I did not know any of it. I just knew I had 4 daughters and 1 chance. This is that story. Stay with me. I was 19 years old when my father sold me. He didn't call it that. He called it a marriage arrangement. But I know what it was. He sat me down one evening and told me not ask me. Told me that a man named Hank Calloway had come through town, was looking for a wife, and that my father had agreed on my behalf. I asked him one question. Just one. What am I worth to you, Papa? He didn't flinch. He said, $10. And 1 less mouth to feed. $10. I was packed and married within 2 weeks. I had never met Hank before the day I became his wife. He was 40 years old. I was 19. He was a ranch hand passing through Tennessee, broad-shouldered and plain-spoken. And he looked at me the way a man looks at something he has just purchased and is deciding whether he overpaid. I told myself it would be okay. That was the first lie I ever told myself. Hank wanted one thing above everything else in this world. Un son. He talked about it constantly. A boy to carry his name. A boy to work the land beside him. A boy to prove Hank Calloway was worth something. I got pregnant in the first year. When the baby came, Hank stood in the doorway of that room with his hat in his hands and he said, "Is it a boy?" It was not a boy. She was the most perfect thing I had ever seen in my life. Dark eyes, already wide open, already watching everything. I named her Lily. Hank walked out without saying a word. That was the first time. It would not be the last. 3 more daughters came after Lily. Rose sweet, quiet, always drawing something on any scrap of paper she could find. Clara stubborn and brave, the one who asked every question nobody else dared to ask. Baby May, 4 years old, round-cheeked, the kind of child who falls asleep mid-sentence and wakes up already laughing. 4 daughters. 4 times Hank stood in that doorway and walked away. He never learned their favorite colors. He never sat with them in the evenings. He looked at them the way a man looks at a debt he cannot pay, with resentment and with exhaustion and with the constant low burn of a man who believes life has cheated him. The drinking got worse every year. There were weeks with no money, days with no food on the table. I kept the garden. I kept the house. I kept those girls fed and clean and told every single night that they were loved. I remember one night Lily was maybe 7, Rose was 4. I had not eaten in 2 days because whatever food we had went to the girls first. Always the girls first. I was sitting at that kitchen table after they were asleep, and I put my face in my hands, and I talked to God. Is this my whole life? I asked him. Is this all there is? You gave me these 4 children, and nothing to give them with. Did you even think about what you were doing when you put me here? No answer. Just the sound of the wind against the windows, and Hank passed out in the next room. But I got up the next morning, because those 4 girls were going to wake up and need their mother to be standing. So I stood. That is the thing nobody tells you about surviving. It is not one big brave moment. It is just getting up every single morning, no matter what. I was doing it all alone. I had been doing it alone from the beginning, but I stayed. Because in 1887, in a small, dusty Texas frontier town called Dry Creek, a woman with 4 daughters and no money had nowhere to go. The law was the husband's. The house was the husband's. The children by law were the husband's. I had nothing that was mine, except those 4 daughters and whatever I could protect them with. I stayed, and I survived. And I kept my daughters close. And then one October night everything changed. The harvest moon that night was red, low and heavy in the sky, the color of old rust. I remember standing at the kitchen window looking at it and feeling something I could not name, like the air before a storm, still and wrong. Hank had been at the Devil's Lantern Saloon since noon. He came home after midnight. I was awake. I was always awake when he came home late, sitting by the window, mending in my lap, listening for his footsteps. I had learned to read the weight of those footsteps over 14 years. How drunk, how angry, how dangerous. That night, his steps were slow but certain. He wasn't stumbling. He was walking like a man who had made a decision and felt good about it. He sat down at the kitchen table. He looked at me with an expression I had never seen on his face before. Something almost like satisfaction, like pride. And he told me about Chester Dulaine. Chester Dulaine, 52 years old, wealthy landowner, from the next county, fine clothes, smooth voice, the kind of man who tipped his hat in public and did things in private that nobody talked about in polite company. Every woman in Dry Creek knew what Chester Dulaine was. We knew it the way women always know without being told directly, without proof. Just that cold, certain knowing that comes from watching a man's eyes when he looks at young girls. We kept our daughters away from him. That was the rule, unspoken but absolute. And Hank had spent the afternoon drinking with him. Hank leaned back in his chair and told me the whole thing like he was proud of himself. He and Dulaine had gotten to talking. Dulaine mentioned he needed a young housekeeper for his property, someone to help around the house. A girl young, obedient, easy to manage, and Hank had told him about Lily, 14 years old, our firstborn daughter. The deal was $50. I put down my mending. I asked him to say it again. He did. Slowly, patiently, like I was having trouble understanding something simple. $50, Sarah. That's more than I make in 3 months. Dulaine's a rich man. She'll be well taken care of. She's old enough to work. She's just a mouth to feed around here. We got too many mouths. Too many mouths. I sat completely still, because in that moment, I did not hear Hank's voice. I heard my father's voice, one less mouth to feed. I was 19 again, sitting in Roy Greer's kitchen, being told I had been sold. I felt that same floor drop out, that same cold, terrible understanding that to the man who was supposed to protect me, I was not a person. I was a transaction. And now, in my own home, with my own child, the same thing was happening. My father had sold me for $10. My husband was selling my daughter for $50. Different men, same price on a daughter's life. And Chester Dulaine I knew, the way every woman in Dry Creek knew, was not looking for a housekeeper. I did not scream. I did not cry. I looked at Hank Calloway's face and understood, fully and finally, exactly who he was. And then I watched him pour himself one more glass of whiskey. And then I watched him tip sideways off his chair. He hit the kitchen floor with a heavy thud and went, still breathing hard, passed out cold, dead to the world. I stood up. I walked over. I looked down at this man I had been married to for 14 years. And I thought, this is my only chance. I have maybe 4 hours. I moved through that dark house fast and quiet. First the girls. I woke them one by one. Hand over the mouth. Lips to the ear. Don't make a sound. We are leaving. Right now. Lily understood immediately. She got up without a single question. That girl, 14 years old, dark eyes wide in the dark. She looked at me, and she just knew. She started helping me without being asked. Rose was groggy, but obedient. Clara held her ragdoll tight and made no sound. Baby May, 4 years old, confused, half asleep, looked at me with those round dark eyes. I pressed my forehead to hers and whispered, "It's a nighttime adventure, my love." She accepted that, because 4-year-olds still trust their mothers completely. God, let me be worthy of that trust. I packed in the dark. I knew exactly what to take. I had been thinking about this, not tonight specifically, but a night like this, for longer than I cared to admit. From under the floorboard, my tin box, $3. Every coin I had hidden over 2 years, a few pennies at a time. From the household money Hank occasionally gave me, $3.40. That was everything I had in this world. 4 changes of clothes for the girls, 1 spare dress for me, the wool blanket, cornbread wrapped in cloth, my mother's silver cross, and the papers, the written testimonies I had quietly collected from other women in Dry Creek, names, dates, amounts, every story told to me in whispers behind the dry goods store. And after Sunday service, I folded those pages and tucked them inside my dress, against my skin, next to my heart. Hank's old wagon sat by the barn. 1 old horse, 2 wobbling wheels, a cracked side plank, held together with rope. It was all we had. I loaded my daughters onto that wagon in the dark, climbed up front, took the reins, and I drove away from Dry Creek without looking back once. Hank was still on the kitchen floor. He did not even know we were gone. 200 miles to Harlan's Crossing. I had heard the name once from a woman at the dry goods store who had a sister living there. "It's a real town," she had said. "Schoolhouse, a market, work if you need it." That was all I had. A name. And the memory of a sentence, spoken by a woman I barely knew. That was enough. 4 days on the road. sleeping under the wagon at night. All 4 girls pressed together, under the one blanket. I sat up keeping watch most nights, with Hank's old hunting knife across my knees, listening to every sound in the dark. The first night Rose cried quietly for a long time. Not from fear, she was too young to fully understand what we were running from. She cried because she had left her drawings behind. 3 years of drawings on scraps of paper, tucked in a wooden box under her bed. She had forgotten them in the rush. I held her, and I did not tell her it would be okay. I told her the truth. "You will make more," I said. "You will fill up a whole new box. I promise." She believed me. I was grateful she still could. The cornbread ran out on day 2. Clara got a fever on day 3. I pulled the wagon over to the side of the road and pressed my hand to her forehead and felt that terrifying heat. And I sat there on that hard ground next to my sick child, and I talked to God. "I have nothing," I told him. $3.40, and a broken wagon, and 4 daughters, and nowhere safe to go. I need you to show up right now. Not tomorrow. Right now. 20 minutes later, I am not making this up, an older farm wife appeared from a house set back off the road. She had seen us pulled over. She took one look at the wagon, one look at my face, and went back inside. She came out with a pot of soup, a jar of cold water, and a small cloth bag with bread and dried apple. She set everything down beside the wagon. She did not ask a single question. She just looked at me with the eyes of a woman who understood exactly what she was looking at. She said, "Just keep going, honey." 4 words. I held on to them for the rest of that road. On the 4th morning, cold, stiff, every bone in my body aching from 4 nights on the ground, I saw a church steeple rise up above the flat land ahead of us, pale against the morning sky. Harlan's Crossing. I pulled the reins, stopped the wagon. I sat there for a moment and just breathed. 4 days, 200 miles, $3, 4 daughters, and a broken wagon, and a farm wife's soup, and 4 words from a stranger. We had made it. But what came next, I had no idea. No idea at all. Before I tell you what happens next, drop a comment right now and tell me where you are watching from. What time is it where you are? I have had people tell me they listened to this story at midnight when they couldn't sleep. I want to know where you are. You are not alone. Now let me tell you about the man on Sycamore Hill. Harlan's Crossing was everything Dry Creek was not. Wide streets, real buildings, a proper schoolhouse, people walking like they had somewhere worth going. We parked the wagon on a flat piece of ground, near an old cottonwood tree on the edge of town. That broken-down wagon became our home. Canvas sheets strung from the side for shade. Girls inside. Me sitting up at night keeping watch. $3. 4 daughters. A cracked wagon. That was everything. I went looking for work the next morning. Market, no. Laundry house, no. Church, nothing. Then Bess Carter, a wide, warm woman who ran the town bakery and had the kind of face you trusted, immediately pulled me aside. "You want real work? Steady pay? Go up to the Whitmore place. Top of Sycamore Hill. Big house. The man there, James Whitmore, he is decent. Recently divorced. Lives alone. Half the town has tried to sell him something or push their daughters at him. He turns everyone away. But he needs real help. Real work. Someone who actually means it." I walked up Sycamore Hill that same afternoon. The house was enormous. White painted wood, 2 full stories, wide front porch, glass in every window. The garden out front had once been beautiful and was now completely overgrown, wild and neglected, like something abandoned that was quietly waiting to be cared for again. The man who answered the door was 40 years old, tall, dark hair, calm eyes the color of river water on a clear day, handsome in the quiet way, not loud about it, not performing it. He just stood there in the doorway and looked at me, and here is the thing I noticed first, the thing that made me stop for just a second. He looked at my face, not through me, not past me, not calculating. He looked at me like he was actually trying to understand who I was. I had never had a man look at me that way. I told him I needed work, cooking, cleaning, whatever needed doing. He was quiet for one moment. Then, "Can you start today?" James Whitmore, recently divorced from a woman named Catherine, who had left him for a wealthier man back east. No children. He had wanted them desperately. That door had closed and left this big house on Sycamore Hill completely empty. He was not bitter. That was the part I could not understand at first. A man left alone, every reason to be hard and cold, and he was not. He was steady, patient. He said, "Please and thank you," like he meant them both every single time. I kept waiting for the other side of him to appear. It never did. I cleaned that house from the ground up. I cooked real meals. Not the careful, rationed cooking of a woman managing scarcity, but full, generous meals with whatever was in that kitchen. I organized. I repaired. I scrubbed floors that had not been properly scrubbed in months. I lit the fireplace every morning, so it was warm when James came downstairs. He noticed all of it, but he noticed it quietly, not with praise or with the kind of attention that feels like it wants something back. He noticed it the way a man notices when something cold begins to warm up, like he was watching his house come back to life room by room, and was grateful in a way he did not quite know how to say. He was always careful with me, always left distance, always asked before he came into a room I was working in, like he understood, without me having to tell him that a woman who had lived the life I had lived needed space to trust on her own terms. I did not know what to do with a man like that. I kept working. I kept watching. I kept waiting for the other side of him to appear. It never did. Then one afternoon he came home early from town and found my 4 daughters sitting on his front porch steps. Lily was reading aloud from a book she had found in his library. Rose and Clara were listening with their chins in their hands. Baby May was asleep against Rose's shoulder, one small fist curled under her chin. James stopped at the gate. He stood there, this tall, quiet, lonely man in front of his enormous empty house, and he just watched. And then he walked up slowly and sat down on the steps a few feet away from the girls. And he listened. He didn't announce himself. He didn't make it a moment. He just sat down like it was the most natural thing in the world and listened to Lily read. I was watching from the window, and something happened to me in that moment that I cannot fully explain even now. All my life, I had watched men look at daughters and see burden. My father, Hank, Chester Dulaine, and every man like him. Men who looked at a little girl and saw a cost, a problem, a transaction waiting to happen. Here was this man sitting on his porch steps, work jacket still on, listening to a 14-year-old girl read a book, like it was the best thing that had happened to him in a long time. Maybe it was. I stood at that window for a long time after that. 6 weeks in, James sat at the kitchen table after supper and told me the truth about his life. The marriage, the divorce, the empty house, the years of wanting children, and watching that door close. "I have everything," he said quietly, "and I am the loneliest man I know." No self-pity, just a plain fact, said out loud, maybe for the first time. I sat down across from him, and I told him everything. My father, the $10, Hank, and the 14 years of cold silence. The daughters he never wanted. The night with the red harvest moon. The $50. The escape in the dark with $3 and 4 girls and a broken wagon. I told him we were still living in that wagon. James was quiet for a long time. Then he stood up and said, "There are 4 empty bedrooms upstairs. They have been empty for years. I would like very much if you and your daughters used them." "Mr. Whitmore." "James, please." I accepted. Love grew slowly, the way real things do. James read to the girls in the evenings. He fixed Clara's broken toy cart. He taught Rose the names of every plant in the garden. He talked to Lily like she was a person with thoughts worth hearing, and Lily, who could read people the way I could, decided within 2 weeks that James Whitmore was the safest man she had ever known. Baby May called him the tall man for the first month. Then one morning she climbed onto his knee at breakfast, patted his face with both hands, and called him my James. He looked like someone had given him the world. 4 months after we moved in, James asked me to walk with him in the garden at sunset. He stopped. He turned to me. "I love you, Sarah. And I love those girls. Every one of them. You don't have to answer me tonight. You don't have to answer me ever. I just needed you to know." I looked at this quiet, gentle man in the last light of day. I thought of my father. I thought of Hank. Every price that had ever been put on me. And then I thought, this is what it was supposed to be. All along, this is what I was supposed to have. "James," I said, "I don't need more time." We were married in the spring. Small ceremony. Pastor, Bess from the bakery. 4 daughters, in clean dresses. Baby May threw flower petals with great enthusiasm and got most of them in Rose's hair. Everybody laughed. I smiled that day in a way I had not smiled in 20 years. God had not been ignoring me. He had been building something. But even in the happiest season of my life, something was still burning inside me. Because Chester Dulaine was still out there, and those pages were still folded inside my tin box. And I was not done yet. Stop right here for just 1 second. If this story is reaching something inside you, if you have ever felt like the people who should have protected you were the very ones who hurt you most, I want you to do one thing right now. Subscribe, hit that bell, because this channel exists for stories exactly like Sarah's. And if someone in your life needs to hear this, share it right now. You never know who is waiting for it. Now, let me tell you what those pages did. 6 months after our wedding, I laid those papers on James's desk. Every page I had collected. Every name. Every date. Every amount paid. The women of Dry Creek, who had spoken to me in whispers behind the dry goods store, at the well, after Sunday service. 3 families whose daughters had gone to Chester Dulaine's property and never been properly spoken of again. I told James everything, not just my story, all of it. The full pattern, 11 years, multiple girls, always framed as housekeeping or early marriage, fathers who were desperate or greedy or both, a sheriff named Tom Briggs who played cards with Dulane every Friday night and had never once asked a question. I told James that Hank had known exactly what kind of man Dulane was. He had known and agreed anyway. James read every single page. He did not speak for a long time. When he looked up, those calm river water eyes were not calm. How long has this been going on? Long enough, I said, that those men believe nothing will ever happen to them. James stood up slowly. I have 3 friends in the Texas State Marshal's office and 1 on the district court. I want to write them tonight. He paused. I want to end this, Sarah. I put my hand on those pages. I'll write it with you, I said. Deputy Marshal Caleb Horn arrived 2 weeks later with 2 other marshals. He was serious and careful, and he sat at our dining table for 3 full hours. I told them everything, clearly, without shaking, without tears. I had waited too long for this to waste it on anything except the truth. The written testimonies, the names and dates, my account of that October night, the names of the families, the name of Sheriff Briggs. When I finished, Marshal Horn looked at his notes and then looked at me. Mrs. Whitmore, how did you collect all of this? 1 conversation at a time, I said. Women talk to each other. Men just never thought it mattered. He looked at me for a moment. Then he said, "It matters." 4 marshals at his door before breakfast. He came out in his fine coat with that smooth, confident expression, the face of a man who had never been told no, who had spent 52 years arranging the world around his comfort and his appetites, who believed that money was the same thing as safety. That expression did not last long. When they searched his property, they found something nobody expected. Records, written in his own handwriting. Going back 11 years. A ledger, essentially. Organized. Neat. Amounts paid. Names of fathers. Names of girls. Dates of transactions. Notes on each arrangement. Chester Dulane had kept records like a businessman. Because to him, that is exactly what this was. 17 names. 17 daughters. 17 girls handed over by desperate or greedy or broken men for amounts between $8 and $60. 17 lives bought and buried inside his property, like they had never mattered at all. When those records were read aloud in the district court, the room went completely silent. Not the usual courtroom silence of boredom or formality. The silence of people who have just heard something that changes the shape of what they thought was possible. People sitting very still with the weight of 17 names sitting on their chests. Even the court reporters stopped writing for a moment. And then something I had not expected and will never forget. 2 other families came forward within the week. Women who had been carrying this for years. Mothers who had gone silent out of shame, out of fear, out of the absolute certainty that nobody with any power would ever listen to them. They had been waiting, all that time, waiting for someone else to go first. I had gone first. Now, they came. Sheriff Tom Briggs was stripped of his badge within the month. 18 months in county jail. All those years of looking away. All that goodwill from Dulane card games, drinks, small envelopes of money passed across a table. It bought him exactly what it was worth in the end. Nothing. Chester Dulain lost everything. His land, his money, his name, the fine coat and the smooth voice and the hand-tipped hat, all of it gone. He died in a county jail in 1891, unmourned, unvisited. Not one person came. Now Hank, after I left Dry Creek that October night, Hank woke up on the kitchen floor and found everything gone. His wife, his daughters, his horse, his wagon. He raged for a week. Told anyone who would listen that I had stolen from him, that I had taken his children without right, that I was a thief and a runaway wife, and he had every legal right to demand them back. The town of Dry Creek, the town that had watched me survive for 14 years, was not sympathetic. The women especially. They had seen me at the well, at the dry goods store, at Sunday service with 4 little girls in tow, all of them clean and pressed despite everything. They had said nothing all those years, because there was nothing to say that would help, but they had seen. Women always see. When Hank went around town telling his story, those women looked at him and did not offer the sympathy he was looking for. He left Dry Creek within the month, drifted between ranches, more drinking, moving from town to town the way men without purpose do, not running toward anything, just running, never understanding why the emptiness kept following him no matter how far he went. Deputy Marshal Horn's men found him 8 months later, a small town called Red Bluff, working as a stable hand, sleeping in a room above the barn. A man who had once had a house and a wife and 4 daughters, reduced to a room above a stable in a town where nobody knew his name. When they arrested him, conspiracy in the attempted sale of a minor, his name in Dulain's records. The arrangement on that October night, Hank's first reaction was to laugh, like it was a joke, like these serious men with their badges had come to the wrong address. Then they showed him the evidence. My testimony, his name in Dulain's handwriting, Lily Calloway, age 14, arranged by H. Calloway, amount $50, October 1887. Hank stopped laughing. During his formal questioning, there is one note in the marshal's records that I have read many times over the years. Hank asked, at first, whether it was Sarah who had reported him. When they confirmed it was, he went quiet for a long time. Then he said, and these words were written down by the marshal's clerk, and I have read them with my own eyes. She was a good woman. I knew that then. I just didn't care enough. 14 years. 4 daughters who grew up watching their father look through them like they were furniture. A wife who worked herself to the bone, kept everything together with nothing, protected 4 children with everything she had. I knew that then. I just didn't care enough. After everything, after every cold year and every empty table, and every morning those little girls woke up to a father who wished they were someone else. That was the sum total of what Hank Calloway had to say. Not an apology, not an explanation, just that small, useless acknowledgement from a man who had finally run out of road. He was sentenced to 4 years in the state penitentiary, served 3, released quietly, never came back to Dry Creek. No one went looking. No one missed him. The day James told me Hank had been sentenced, I was standing in my kitchen. Real kitchen. Proper light. Enough food. 4 daughters doing their schoolwork at the table. I nodded once. Went back to what I was doing. That evening, after the girls were in bed, James found me on the back porch sitting in the dark. He sat beside me. No questions. just close enough that I could feel the warmth of him steady, as always, solid, as always. After a long while, I spoke. My father sold me for $10 when I was 19. My husband tried to sell my daughter for 50. And for so many years, I believed I had done something wrong, that I had caused it somehow, that I deserved it. I looked up at the Texas sky, enormous, dark, full of stars. I didn't, I said. I never did. James took my hand. We sat there in the dark a long time, not talking, just sitting together in the quiet of a life that was finally, completely mine. Lily became a school teacher in Harlan's Crossing, taught there 31 years. She was known for one thing above everything else: the way she watched over the quiet girls, the ones who seemed afraid to take up space, the ones who flinched when someone raised their voice, the ones who had learned, young, to make themselves small. Lily saw them, every single one. She made sure they knew someone saw them. She named her first daughter Sarah. Rose opened her own seamstress shop on Main Street, booked 3 months ahead by the time she was 25. She never forgot that box of drawings she left behind in Dry Creek. She filled 10 more. Clara moved to San Antonio, worked in a county hospital, wrote me a letter every single week without fail, until the day I could no longer read them. Baby May, my round-cheeked, flower-petal-throwing May, never left Harlan's Crossing. Married a kind man who built furniture, had 5 children, came to Sunday dinner every week of her life, always 20 minutes late, always bringing too much food. James Whitmore lived to be 74 years old. He was the most devoted father those 4 girls could have asked for. Not because he replaced what they had lost, but because he showed them every single day what they actually deserved. What a man who loved them looked like. What safety felt like. They never forgot it. I outlived him by 9 years. I spent those years in my garden, in my kitchen with my grandchildren underfoot, at my Sunday table, always too small for everyone, always too loud, always full. On the last page of the journal I kept in those final years, I wrote this: I was sold for $10 when I was 19 years old. My husband tried to sell my daughter for 50. Those prices were lies. Every price ever put on me was a lie. I know what I was worth now. I see it every Sunday at this table. It was worth every single dark mile to get here. Sarah's story is done. But I believe if you stayed all the way to the end, you stayed for a reason. Maybe you needed to hear that survival is possible, that the dark miles lead somewhere real. Miles. That the people who put a price on you were wrong. They were always wrong. Subscribe right now if this story moved you. Share it with someone who needs it tonight. Leave a comment and tell me what part of Sarah's story hit you the hardest. I read every single comment. Every one. There are more stories coming. Real stories, real strength, real people who went through the fire and came out the other side. Thank you for being here. And remember what Sarah said: you are worth far more than any price anyone ever put on you.